And I just keep coming back to that pizza delivery story from 1996 because it is honestly blowing my mind. It perfectly captures how a seemingly moral crusade can just go completely off the rails.
Right, the San Francisco case.
Exactly. So for you listening, picture this. A city supervisor's relative couldn't get a pizza delivered to his home because he lived in a high-crime neighborhood.
Right.
And the immediate reaction to this was just this massive outburst of moral indignation. Like, the city literally passed a law decreeing that if a delivery company serves the public anywhere in the city, they must deliver everywhere in the city.
Which, I mean, on the surface, that sounds like a victory for equality, right? It sounds fair. But we have to define what we are actually looking at here, which is the core of what we are unpacking today.
Right, because that dynamic is exactly what we're digging into. We've got this huge stack of economic and philosophical essays tackling this really controversial idea of cosmic justice.
Yes.
And we're trying to figure out the arguments behind why policies that sound morally perfect on paper so often end up, well, backfiring in reality.
And that pizza law is the perfect entry point. Because the essays point out the critical difference between what we think of as traditional justice and what the author calls cosmic justice.
Right.
Traditional justice is just about impartial processes. It's about ensuring the rules of the game are applied equally to everyone, regardless of the outcome. A fair trial is a fair trial, whether it ends in an acquittal or a conviction.
I've tried to think of an analogy for this earlier. It's kind of like a referee in a basketball game, right?
Yeah.
Traditional justice is the referee just making sure nobody travels and nobody fouls.
Yes, exactly.
But cosmic justice is different. Cosmic justice would be the referee looking at the teams, seeing that one team is, I don't know, genetically much shorter, and deciding to give them a 10-point head start to balance out the universe's unfairness.
That's exactly it. Cosmic justice is the attempt to eliminate undeserved disadvantages. It's the idea that it is fundamentally unfair in a cosmic, universe-altering sense. That innocent people living in a high-crime neighborhood are denied a service simply because of where they live, through no fault of their own.
And through no fault of their own is the ultimate rallying cry here. But I want to pause and ask you, the listener, listening to us right now, think about what this actually means on a practical level. Because the essays hit you with this blunt reality.
They really do.
The author argues that trying to fix this cosmic injustice comes with a brutal, tangible cost. The cost of forcing those deliveries isn't just a few late pizzas or like some cool garlic knots. The cost is dead delivery drivers.
Yes.
The statistical reality of sending drivers into high-crime areas means placing innocent workers in the crosshairs of violence just to satisfy a moral absolute.
Precisely. The argument here is that, well, if you were God creating the universe from scratch, you obviously wouldn't include high-crime neighborhoods where people couldn't get deliveries. But we aren't God.
Right, we're stuck here.
We are operating in a flawed existing reality. The source material contends that the moment you refuse to weigh the costs, the moment you say justice must be done at all costs, you are no longer dealing with a rational societal framework.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the philosophy just hits the pavement. How many pizza deliveries are worth a human life?
Right.
10,000. 1,000,000. The moment you admit you have to weigh those costs, you've abandoned the quest for cosmic justice. You are back in the messy human realm of cost-benefit analysis.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author uses this to explain why the pursuit of perfect fairness can become so destructive. There's this brilliant, albeit pretty grim, analogy of a sinking ship presented in the reading.
Oh yeah, this part was intense.
Imagine a ship going down in the middle of the ocean. There are 300 passengers on board, but only 200 life preservers.
A literal life or death math problem.
Exactly. Now, what is the only truly just solution where everyone is treated with perfect cosmic equality? The only way to ensure nobody gets an unfair, unearned advantage over anyone else is if nobody gets a life preserver.
Wow.
The only perfectly just solution is that everyone drowns.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this, because that is incredibly bleak. You're basically outlining a philosophy that says society has to turn a blind eye to genuine suffering. I mean, isn't it human nature to want that fairness?
Of course it is.
Look at it this way. Say we see a guy who was born to abusive, drug-addicted parents, and he battles through all of that trauma just to become an honest, hardworking laborer. And then you look at a rich kid, born with a silver spoon, goes to elite schools, and becomes a famous, wealthy scientist. Don't we all intrinsically want the laborer to win the lottery?
Yeah, we do.
We want to reward his merit, his struggle, it feels like the right thing to do. How do proponents of this theory justify just leaving people behind?
What's fascinating here is that the text completely validates that feeling. Almost everyone across the entire political spectrum recognizes and dislikes the painful inequalities of life. But here is the harsh reality the source lays out. We do not know how to reward merit.
But surely we can look at someone's background and make a judgment.
Can we? Think about it. How do you quantify the advantage of just having a stable household versus a chaotic one? How do you measure the exact economic value of your genetics or your physical beauty, the specific family culture you were born into, or just being in the right place at the right time? Human beings simply lack the omniscience required to untangle what is an unearned windfall gain versus what is actual personal sacrifice.
I mean, yeah, you can't put a spreadsheet together for that, no.
You can't. And because we can't calculate merit, the argument is that a functioning society must reward productivity instead.
Okay, so productivity, not merit.
Right. We pay the surgeon for a successful surgery. We do not pay the surgeon based on how hard they had to study to overcome a bad childhood. And the essays point out why this distinction is so vital rewarding. Productivity creates an economic mechanism that benefits everyone.
Right, because if you reward the successful surgery, you get more successful surgeries.
Exactly. When you financially incentivize the result rather than the struggle, you encourage people to develop skills that are actually useful to others. That productivity raises the standard of living for the entire society. You get better medicine, safer bridges, faster technology.
I see what you're saying. So wishing the hardworking laborer wins the lottery is perfectly fine. It's a great human impulse.
Yes.
But if you try to build a massive government policy around determining and rewarding merit, you create a system where everyone is paralyzed. You literally have, like, bureaucrats trying to audit people's childhood trauma to decide their salary. It's impossible.
It requires a level of knowledge and control that no human institution possesses. And when society realizes it can't measure individual merit, it inevitably shifts its focus. It zooms out. It tries to measure fairness by looking at groups.
And this leads us straight into the modern obsession with statistical disparities. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the arguments presented here challenge the idea that unequal outcomes automatically equal discrimination. And it uses real data to do it.
Huh.
Let's look at the home lending firestorm from 1993.
The Washington Post story.
Yes, the Washington Post and a bunch of politicians came out with these explosive stats showing that black applicants were being turned down for mortgage loans at a higher rate than white applicants. The media immediately declared the entire banking system inherently racist.
But when you actually look at the data, the exact same set of statistics, the author points out how the narrative starts to fracture. For instance, those same numbers show that white applicants were turned down at a higher percentage than Asian applicants.
Right.
But that didn't fit the prevailing vision of a white-dominated discriminatory system, so it was completely ignored.
Yes, they totally glided over it, like it wasn't even there.
Furthermore, when you control for the variables, the disparities had mundane mathematical explanations. Minority applicants in that specific data set had higher debt burdens, poorer credit histories, and were disproportionately seeking riskier multi-dwelling loans rather than single-family homes.
Okay, let's slow down and explain that for a second because I think it's important. Why is a multi-dwelling loan inherently riskier for a bank?
Well, if you're a loan officer, a multi-dwelling loan like buying a duplex or a triplex to rent out is a commercial risk. It's not just a family paying for a roof over their head.
But it's a business venture.
Exactly. The buyer is now relying on finding reliable tenants, managing maintenance for multiple units, and dealing with potential vacancies. If the tenants don't pay rent, the buyer can't pay the mortgage. The principal is usually much larger, and the default risk is statistically higher.
So when a loan officer is looking at that application, the math demands a higher threshold for approval, regardless of who is sitting across the desk.
Precisely. And when researchers held all those variables, constant comparing applicants with the exact same debt, same credit, and same type of loan, the gap in approval rates between white and black applicants shrank to just 6%.
Okay, hold on, because this is the part that genuinely stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
That remaining 6% gap, they dug into it and traced it down to different approval rates at a single bank.
Yep.
And that single bank was a black-owned bank. Holy shit. The entire national narrative, the massive outrage about a racially biased system of home lending, was largely rooted in the lending practices of one bank that wasn't even white or racist.
It really highlights how dangerous aha statistics can be. The author argues that we eagerly accept numbers as evidence when they confirm our preconceived visions, and we completely ignore the underlying mechanics when they don't.
That's wild.
And the essays provide a rapid-fire list of historical examples suggesting that massive statistical disparities are actually the historical norm everywhere, not the exception.
Oh yeah, the list of global examples here is wild.
Yeah, it really is. In California, people of Cambodian ancestry own more than 4/5 of all the donut shops.
Wait, really? 4/5?
Yes. During the 1960s in Malaysia, the Chinese minority supplied between 80 and 90% of all university students in medicine, science, and engineering.
Insane.
And in the early 20th century, in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul, people of German ancestry owned almost all of the manufacturing across multiple industries, from hats to stoves to soup.
And nobody is claiming the Cambodians are running a systemic oppressive cartel to keep white Californians out of the donut business.
Right. The assumption that in the absence of discrimination, all groups would be randomly and evenly distributed across all professions and income levels is treated here as a complete mirage. It has never happened anywhere in the history of the world.
Right, because different cultures prioritize different skills, different geographies offer different opportunities, and those variables compound over generations. So, if racial and ethnic statistics are so frequently misread, what about class? What about the classic rich versus poor divide? Because this is another massive statistical battleground. We always hear about the top 1% versus the bottom 20%.
It's true.
But the essays make this brilliant observation that I had never really considered. When we talk about classes, we are very often just looking at statistical snapshots of flesh and blood people at different stages of their lives.
This is a crucial point in the reading. We hear that a small percentage of the population holds a massive percentage of the wealth. But the data shows that the vast majority of wealth in America is held by people over the age of 50.
Right. Wait, so it's mostly just older people.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And everyone who is old was once young. It's not a static, permanent class of oligarchs. It's people who have had 30 more years to build a business, gain seniority, pay off a mortgage, or put money in a 401k.
That makes so much sense.
When you were 22 and fresh out of school, you are almost by definition in the lowest income bracket. You have no assets and no experience.
But you don't stay there.
Exactly. Studies tracking individuals over time, like a major 8-year study from the University of Michigan mentioned in the sources, found that only 3% of the American population remained in the bottom 20% of income for that entire 8-year period.
I mean, 3%. That statistic is staggering. It totally reframes the conversation. The author uses this analogy that is so spot on. It's like hearing a statistic that someone gets hit by a car in New York City every 20 minutes and thinking, man, that one guy must be getting awfully tired of being hit by cars.
It's the exact same logical fallacy.
Yes. The media constantly talks about the poor as this static, unchanging 20% block of humanity. But if you actually track the timeline of wealth accumulation, the flesh and blood people who occupy that statistical bracket are constantly cycling in and out of it as they age, gain skills, or change jobs.
Right. The 25-year-old barista in the bottom bracket becomes the 45-year-old regional manager in the top bracket, which raises an important question. If these statistics don't actually prove systemic oppression, but what the author calls anointed visionaries still passionately want to force equal outcomes to achieve cosmic justice, how do they actually go about doing it?
Well, according to this analysis, it requires completely upending the rule of law. Because traditional justice is simple, right? The rules just have to be known in advance. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law. You know the boundary.
Yes.
If you speed past a sign that says 65 miles per hour, you know you broke the rule.
Yeah.
But cosmic justice isn't about rules, it's about results. And to guarantee a specific result, you have to constantly change the rules retrospectively.
The reading uses the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, as a prime example of this shift. Let's look at how they handle mental illness in the workplace. Under their guidelines, an employer cannot ask about a history of mental illness during an interview. However, if they hire someone with, say, schizophrenia, the employer is legally required to provide reasonable accommodation for that employee's special needs once the condition becomes apparent.
But wait, how does that actually play out? If I'm a small business owner running a hardware store and I hire someone, what am I supposed to do? What does reasonable accommodation even mean?
You don't know, and that's the point the author's making. You have absolutely no idea if you've broken the law until a court sues you for millions of dollars after the fact. What constitutes a reasonable accommodation? The law doesn't explicitly define it beforehand. It can't.
Why can't it?
Because the law isn't vague by accident here. It is necessarily vague. If your goal is to fine-tune the universe to ensure cosmic fairness for every unique individual and every unique condition, you cannot write a generalized rule.
Wow.
A generalized rule is traditional justice. Cosmic justice demands that you judge every single situation retrospectively based on the outcome.
Damn. So the argument is that we are literally replacing a government of laws with a government of arbitrary edicts. You are reverting society to a state where regulators and judges act like kings.
Essentially, yes.
They punish people simply because they decide to peek under the blindfold of justice to see who is favored and who is disadvantaged, and then they issue a ruling to balance the cosmic scales. It makes it impossible for anyone to plan or act freely because the legal ground is constantly shifting underneath them.
And that uncertainty is the high price of this pursuit. Which brings us to the psychological core of the reading. Why do so many intellectuals, academics, politicians, and judges pursue this mirage of cosmic justice so relentlessly, even when the empirical evidence suggests it often fails or makes things worse?
Yeah, why do they?
The author argues it is fundamentally about self-exaltation.
Oh, so it's not actually about helping the poor.
According to this view, no. It's about the visionaries getting to feel like saviors. They position themselves morally above the unwashed masses, above the everyday people who just want to follow traditional rules. Championing cosmic justice is a zero-cost moral adventure for them.
Zero cost for them, maybe.
Exactly. Think about it. The costs. The dead truck drivers, the small businesses sued into bankruptcy, the polarized communities are paid by the taxpayers and everyday citizens, not by the visionaries drafting the theories from a university seminar room or a judge's chamber.
Man, it really forces you to look at the world differently. And this is where it comes back to you, the listener. Because what these essays are ultimately saying is that we have to make a choice. We have to choose between living in a messy, unequal reality, a free society where productivity is rewarded, and that productivity ends up lifting the standard of living for everyone, even if it's uneven.
Right.
Or we choose the pursuit of a flawless, mathematically equal cosmos. But to achieve that flawless cosmos, you have to hand over a totalitarian grip on your life, your business, and your laws to a group of self-appointed elites who promise to engineer fairness.
It is a profound choice, and the author leaves the reader with an ancient fable that captures this tragedy perfectly.
Let's hear it.
It's the fable of a dog walking over a bridge with a bone in his mouth. The dog looks down into the water and sees a reflection. He sees what looks like another dog holding a seemingly much larger bone.
Oh, I know this one.
Right, so determined to get that better, larger bone, the dog opens his mouth to grab it. And in doing so, his real bone drops into the water and is lost forever.
And that's the warning here. The quest for cosmic justice might just be that alluring reflection in the water. It's a beautiful, tempting image. But in lunging for it, we risk dropping the real, tangible bone we actually hold, the most prosperous, free, and traditional justice-based society in human history. But here is a final thought I want to leave you with, something that builds on all of this but takes it into the future. We are currently building artificial intelligence and complex algorithms to run our lending, our hiring, and our legal analysis. What happens if we program those AI systems to optimize for cosmic justice instead of traditional impartial rules? An algorithm doesn't care about the messy reality of human cost. It just executes the code. Are we about to build a digital version of that reflection in the water, enforcing a flawlessly equal cosmos at the cost of human freedom? Something to think about.